Oh, you're all terribly well behaved. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the First Religious Society Unitarian Universalist in Newburyport, Massachusetts. My name is Justin Murphy Mancini, and I have just the immense privilege to be the director of church music here. I don't have almost anything to say except hello, welcome. We're so glad that you are here. And if you need a restroom, the stairs to the downstairs are in the vestibule, and then you'll just walk to the opposite end of the church, and you will find restrooms downstairs. That's all I've got, because I have other things that I need to do. So I would just like to extend a warm welcome to my wonderful and beloved colleague, the Reverend Rebecca Bryan.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this important and, I dare say, sacred occasion where we're celebrating you, Barbara. Yes, we are. We agree it is a sacred occasion for all that you've offered, not only to the world of organ music and really across not only this country, but across the world, but certainly here at the First Religious Society, where we hold you in great care and love. So happy birthday. Welcome to all of our guests, all of our members, all of our friends, wherever you've traveled from. Thank you for being here today and for being a part of this very important celebration and joyful occasion. I would ask that you take a moment and make sure that your phones are turned off so that we can enjoy the incredible music we are about to partake in and just be here in this wondrous day. Thank you and welcome again.
It is wonderful to look out at what surely is a who's who of the organist community today. And having done that, I will take my glasses off because I can't read with them. But I can't really read without them either. It's that time of life. But we are gathered here to celebrate an enduring icon, someone whose entire life has been devoted to organ music, organ making, organ history, even organ transplants, though I believe that Barbara still has all of her original equipment. Inevitably, the years will chip away at each of us, and though some folks are made of sterner stuff, perhaps Barbara is made of mahogany rather than pine, and the passage of time has served more to polish than to abrade. I think that's been the case indeed, dear Barbara. The luster of your presence and your impact in the world is almost blinding. What you have accomplished as an organologist, advocate, and exemplar is truly remarkable. I probably know Barbara as a name on a page before I got to meet her. I likely was at the AGO convention in 1976 and would have purchased the marvelous first volume, The Century of American Music, that she published with American composers from 1776 to 1876. I did not meet her until, and it was kind of tangentially, House of Hope Presbyterian Church in St. Paul was soon to install what was, up until the installation in Lausanne, Switzerland, the largest organ that the Fisk shop had ever built. And I had come out to sort of scope the event for local radio coverage and get an interview with Charles Fisk. The shop was busy. I was going to say humming, but it was more like whistling, because as I went through the main workspace to get to Charles's office, which was about as far away as we could get so that I might have a quiet environment, Barbara was up on top of probably the Brustwerk of the organ, or maybe it was the Hauptwerk, but she was ministering to some recalcitrant high-pitched pipes, which continued to sing in the background, even at a distance. And I think probably if we dig around in the pipe dreams, online archive, we can find her work happening as I am talking to Charles Fisk. Many of Barbara's professional colleagues are gathered here today to sing her praises, but before the individual voices sing, we will corporately sing a hymn that Barbara chose for us, and I think it is an entirely appropriate one and pretty much sums up what indeed we all think, understand, and practice. If you will find number 36 in your hymnal, we will reaffirm that when in our music, God is glorified. Where I come from, I would say you sing like Lutherans, but out here in the Northeast country, I think you know what to do and have done it. Thank you. Matthew Bellocchio first met and spoke with Barbara on a bus ride during the 1973 OHS convention. More recently, they've served together on the board of the Methuen Memorial Music Hall, and Matthew has his story to tell.
On behalf of the Music Hall Board of Trustees, welcome to this celebration. Barbara Owen has been a faithful, hardworking, and esteemed Music Hall trustee since 1989, and she has written the definitive history of the Music Hall and its great organ. That book, The Great Organ at Methuen, is our most popular sales item. Since Barbara has done so much for the Music Hall, we wanted to do something for her 90th birthday. We would have liked to hold this event at the Music Hall, but as some of you know, the hall and the great organ go into hibernation in the winter months. We asked Justin Murphy Mancini if the church would be willing to host this event. After all, this place has been Barbara's musical and spiritual home for 6 decades. Justin emailed us back, "The church is very enthusiastic about celebrating Barbara." We'd like to thank Justin, Reverend Rebecca, and the rest of the church for their enthusiastic support and help in planning and hosting this celebration. And a special shout out to the choir members who are hosting some of the out-of-town speakers. It is obvious that Barbara loves and is loved by this amazing congregation. We'd also like to thank today's speakers and organists. All of them were thrilled to be invited. Some have traveled considerable distances to be here. As you will learn, all of today's participants have a connection to Barbara or a story about how she inspired, encouraged, or helped them. I too have a Barbara story. It's because of her that I'm standing here today representing the music hall. For several years, she would email me, inviting me to become a music hall trustee. In 2017, I finally said yes, and in 2021, through a series of unforeseen circumstances, I became the board president. So I owe this job to Barbara. 2 of Barbara's books have been inspiring and helpful to me as an organ historian and as a music hall spokesman. There isn't a month that goes by without my consulting her 1979 book, The Organ in New England, for information about some organ builder, or her 2011 book, The Great Organ at Methuen, to answer questions about the history of the great organ or the music hall. Barbara is the resident sage of the Music Hall Board. Whenever there's a thorny issue which needs to be worked out, she gently offers some well-spoken or well-written suggestions which are usually right on the mark. Next Wednesday is Barbara's actual birthday. She will spend that evening, as she has every 4th Wednesday evening in January since 1990, at the annual meeting of the Music Hall Board of Trustees. We are blessed that she is still a trustee and still brimming with good ideas. So, thank you, Barbara, for all that you have done and continue to do for the music hall, for the organ world, and for all of us gathered here today. This program is our birthday gift to you. We hope you enjoy it.
Just a little introduction to this transcription of the Coronation March of Meyerbeer that Peter is about to play. It's not something that Barbara likely would have chosen for this celebration, but it has a connection to Barbara's early career. Her first organ transplant in 1961, a group of volunteers was moving a small 2-manual E&GG Hook organ, Hook and Hastings, to be proper, to Craigville Tabernacle, a UCC summer conference center in Barnstable on Cape Cod. 5 years later, in 1966, the Organ Historical Society held its annual convention on Cape Cod, and the Craigville Tabernacle was the site of the opening concert, a program of Victorian anthems sung by the Dudley Buck Quartet, made up of several convention committee members. This coronation march was the opening piece on the program, and it left both the organ and the audience gasping. We hope that Barbara does not gasp as she listens to it again today, performed by the irrepressible Peter Krasinski, who will put wind in its sails, surely. He met Barbara as a teenager attending his first AGO Boston chapter meeting. Robert Cornell first met Barbara the day after Thanksgiving in 1969. I'm amazed that people can remember exact dates. When he came up from New Jersey to talk with Charlie Fisk about probably getting a job working for him, but he didn't get to know who Barbara really was until he started to work at the Fisk shop in February in 1970.
As Michael said, I got to know Barbara quite well, beginning in 1970. C.B. Fisk Incorporated had started life as the Andover Organ Company in Methuen, and Barbara probably knows more about how the company managed to end up in Gloucester. But here's the story as I heard it. Apparently, Charlie had decided to move the company to Gloucester, but apparently he never got around to telling his employees about his decision until maybe a week before the movers were to show up. Well, they said, hell, we're not going to move to Gloucester, and we're sure as hell not going to commute there every day. So they got together and arranged to divide up the tools, supplies, and the contracts for organs. Charlie renamed the company as C.B. Fisk, and the folks in Methuen reincorporated as the new Andover Organ Company. So Charlie ended up in Gloucester with machines, lumber, supplies, contracts, and no employees. He needed someone to do the office work, and he knew Barbara was fully capable of that. But he also knew that she had her fingers in most of the organ-related pies in the country. If he got a letter from a church in Oshkosh, Bagosh, who knows where, Barbara would probably know the church and might say, oh yes, it's a wonderful room. The people are really good to work with. They have a terrific music program, and the organist is first rate. I know him very well. Or, it's a terrible room. The rector is impossible to get along with. The organist isn't really an organist. For him, it's just a hobby. He also knew that he could turn her into a first-rate voicer. Barbara was in control of two specific places in the old shop, her voicing room and a big old oak roll-top desk, missing its roll top, which was her own sacred territory. That old shop was gradually sinking into the swamp and wasn't really big enough. So in 1974, we built a new building with the help of Joe Grace, who worked in the shop and had previously been mayor of Gloucester. Barbara's desk was moved into the new office in the new building, but Charlie was very concerned that she might not be so happy about being torn out of her comfortable domain in the old shop. After Barbara retired from Fisk, the desk was moved into the model room, where we build models of churches and models of organs within them. And when Steve Deek became president, he took it over. More recently, John Schreiner has been spending more time in the shop and needed a desk in the drafting room, so I moved into Barbara's old desk. As I was going through the drawers, I came across a document of significant historical importance. And I think this should really live in Barbara's personal archive. So I would like to present this to her. At the top, in Charlie Fisk's hand, it says, a conformal mapping of the Barbar's desk, 874 CBF. I had to Google conformal mapping. It's quite a technical term, by the way. And he has drawn the desk here with every single one of its compartments and each of the drawers, identifying every item in it down to the postal scale and pencils and maintenance books and all sorts of things in great detail, and then has described on this side more details about this desk. He really wanted to move Barbara's desk to the new office as precisely as it had been in the old shop, in hopes that it would make her feel more comfortable. There's one more little gift I'd like to give Barbara, which is also of somewhat historical importance. And I could not do better in describing this to read what Charles wrote on the back of the original. The cat was originally drawn on a small piece of paper by Barbara Owen while the latter was seated in the smallest room in the old workshop on Maplewood Avenue. Originally, it was simply washing itself. Someone later added voicing tools to the original cat drawing, thereby turning it into a self-portrait of Barbara herself. She was always thought of as being cat-like and was a lover of cats. The original drawing was glued to the glass of the door in the voicing room that Barbara used. When the company moved to Condalin Road, efforts were made to detach the cat drawing from the glass with no avail. Shortly after the move, this rendering and enlargement of the original appeared on the office wall of the new shop. Bob Cornell had copied the original and had framed it for posterity. This may be the most sensitive portrait of Barbara Owen in existence, seen as it is through the humorous affections of several of her colleagues at C.B. Fisk. Charles Fisk, March 1980. So, Barbara, here's your original cat.
Thomas Murray began meeting and corresponding with Barbara in 1968 when he made his first trip to scout 19th century Boston instruments. Barbara was most helpful. On that first trip, Thomas saw the organ at Immaculate Conception Church, where he made a fantastic recording of music of César Franck in 1971. He also visited the Unitarian Church in Jamaica Plain and the Simmons in East Boston and others. He saved all correspondence, by the way, so historians in the future will be able to prove the veracity of these statements. The music notes he offers, he's playing pieces from Barbara's collection, American Organ Music, 1776 to 1876. Charles Zoyner, though born in Saxony, emigrated to Boston around 1830 at age 35 and became organist and later president of Boston's Handel and Haydn Society. From 1832 to 39, he was organist at Old St. Paul's Episcopal Church on Tremont Street, where Tom himself was organist and choir master in the 1970s, and his later years were spent in Philadelphia. And the piece by Samuel Sebastian Wesley the Older, as opposed to Samuel Sebastian Wesley the Younger, Samuel Wesley the Older is the composer of the piece we'll hear, who wrote choral music and organ voluntaries, of which the one heard today is from a set of 12, but we don't have time for all of them, but we do have time for the one. Thomas, hit it. Susan Tattersall, who is known universally as an advocate for the historic organs of Mexico, amongst many other things. She's also gotten into violin rebuilding these days. Forgets exactly when it was that she met Barbara, knew of her before they congregated, but was very happy to have been able, during the time when Susie had a shop in Rhinebeck, to not only interact with Barbara through the usual communication media, but also to work together on some projects. And as you can imagine, it was inevitable that these two characters would become good friends. Susan Tattersall.
Hello. It was 1965. Half of you weren't born. Not you. I was taking organ lessons with Jim Wiley on the newly installed Gabriel Ney organ in my home church near Chicago. Jim had studied abroad and traveled widely, and he told me about a lady organ builder he'd met in Massachusetts who drives around in an old car full of pipes and tools and stuff and goes around mucking about in old dusty organs. I was an impressionable teenager. I knew immediately I wanted to be her. Nearly 10 years later, I finally met Barbara when I visited back to the States from Switzerland. And when I moved back to Chicago permanently, she was kind enough to take me in when I attended an AIO meeting in Boston. I think it was around 1979, and we became friends. Sister Barbara, when I started my community-based organ projects in Mexico from my home in Texas, your encouragement by letters and phone meant the world. The Texas builders I talked with dismissed these ideas as worthless, but you believed in supporting not just the organ builder, but also empowering and including the people who live and worship with the organ, and that no organ tradition means less than another. And when I moved to Rhinebeck, you immediately passed on all your maintenance contracts to me. When a project came up in the West Indies, who did you call? Dana Hull, a woman organ builder who was working in Ann Arbor, and me. And some of you may not know this, but we formed the first all-female organ company. It was Dana, Hull, Owen, Tattersall, the Hot Sisters. We thought long and hard about this, and we put together a company motto. Our motto was, "Relax, your organ is in our hands." Unfortunately, Dana broke her hip, and so we needed a third, and so Patty Nilsson from CB Fisk got called in to fill in, be the fourth hot sister. So you made a point of bringing in other women organ builders, and in Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, we did some very, very good work under very difficult circumstances on site in an economically deprived community. I'm sharing my own personal experiences because I know everyone in this room can resonate with them. All of us have benefited from your generosity of spirit, your desire to empower others, your firm belief that we are a community and we do our best work when we work together as a community. And let's face it, we women are 50% of that community. We've all been blessed with your kindness, your wisdom, your willingness to listen and engage, your belief in us and that what we do matters. Also, let's face it, you are so much fun to work with. We had a ball in the West Indies. You're always positive, you have an infectious laugh, we always share a beer after work. You are so much fun. Relative to organ building as an industry, what you have done in terms of shattering a glass ceiling, bad analogy, opening up a shop door, I don't know. By proving women can be successful in an all-male craft is exceptional. Thanks to you, CB Fisk became a leader in having women working in substantive capacities on the shop floor, and this led to other organ builders hiring women as well. I originally shot this topic to Matt and Michael as an exercise in mock indignation, a joke, but somehow they took me seriously. If I'd been able to, I probably would have stuck to the topic. I would have done some research as to just how many women are working as organ builders in substantive roles. When I worked at Rieger Orgelbau in Austria, we had a couple women in the shop, and they just sat at their benches all day just gluing pallets onto sheepskin. Back then, I got used to hearing, women can only do small work. My guys or my wife just can't handle a woman in the shop. Women can't use tools properly. They always hold things close to their bodies. And my absolute hands-down favorite, what if I hire you and you get pregnant? That kind of overt, toxic misogyny isn't tolerated now. and women who wish to learn the craft are taken seriously, and that's largely due to you, Barbara. You may or might not know this. There's a young Brazilian woman, Lucia Lemes, Michael knows her as well, and Lise does, who was sad to see that the Cavaille coil organ in her church in Lorena, Sao Paulo, sat mute and abandoned. She started researching how she might fix it. She heard of you, Barbara, and me, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. And she requested and received an 18-month stint at Taylor & Booty. And from there, she is now working in the Pascal Quarin shop in France, which means that she is a part of the team of people who are working on the Notre Dame organ, as well as restoring several Cavaille coil organs. She's a pipe maker and a voicer, and your pioneering work at Fisk is the gift that keeps on giving across continents and across decades. Your legacy to the world of scholarship, your impeccable research, your engaging writing, this enormous contribution you've made to the body of knowledge regarding the organ, its builders, its composers, the music, and as importantly, its broader social contexts. It's mind-blowing. I don't know how anybody accomplishes all that in one lifetime, and there's probably more to come, and there better be more to come. But there's also the transformative impact you've had on individual lives, like Luciana's and mine. Young women who looked at your organ-building career and decided that they could, should, and had a right to pursue that dream and weren't going to take no for an answer. They may never have had the good fortune to have met you, but they took their lead from you. And while the world isn't drowning in female organ builders, give it time. I love you. Happy birthday.
Make it difficult to read the next one because I've got dewy eyes, Susie. Well spoken. Dana Robinson had no idea when he first met Barbara. I've got the wrong side up. Yes, I've got the, thank you. Rosalind Bonson may have met Barbara at the first OHS convention, which she attended in 1975, centered in New Haven, Connecticut. It was during possibly her year first in Boston, 1975-76, that probably made things more substantial. She doesn't remember the exact time, but became acquainted with New England composers, largely through Barbara's encouragement and knowledge and her collections, which were important in inspiring Rosalind to play, as she has throughout her career, an incredible variety of American composers, and she will do so today. Louise Mundlinger, I just learned today, received some inspiration as a young organist in Stillwater, Minnesota, listening to broadcasts of the Pre-Pipe Dreams program, which had the poetic title The Organ Program, which I did on Minnesota Public Radio from 1970 till 1982. So you never know, either as a broadcaster or as a writer of books, what impact you are going to have. Louise has a story to tell about Hook and Hastings organ that needed to find a new home. And I'm going to let you tell the story because you're going to tell it better than I think.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Michael Barone asked about the first time I met Barbara. And that request became a pebble tossed into my memories. I was a first-year graduate student at New England Conservatory studying with Yuko Hayashi. I arrived at school on a cold day, only to be tasked with driving to Providence to rescue a hook organ in a church that had closed the previous week. There was a danger of vandalism to the instrument, so the request from Yuko was urgent. And those of you who know Yuko can testify to her urgency with anything. With a few other students, we arrived at Providence to be greeted by a no-nonsense Barbara and Ellen Loffman of the Organ Clearinghouse. No coffee, no donuts, just instructions. We removed pipes and placed them in trays at the back of the church. The heat was off. So it was a hook organ in a church in Providence to be shipped off to Japan. But this was to be a talk. I was to give a talk for Barbara Owen. So I had to find the information behind that memory. Which church in Providence, which organ, which city in Japan is the organ extant? And the ripples started to move to a stream. And in the meantime, I made excuses to Michael Barone about my delay and remembering in my first time I ever met Barbara. I started looking. I looked at which organ was it. I started with keywords in a search engine. No luck. So I wrote to Michael Kraft, who's now president of CB Fisk, but he was a student at NEC in 1981. No, he didn't recall the rescue adventure, so it must have happened before he arrived at NEC. I arrived at Boston a year earlier than he did, so it happened in 1980. Michael forwarded my questions to the former president of CB Fisk, Steve Deek, now living in Japan. Did he know the organ? The ripples were now a stream. Bingo! Steve replied with a torrent of information. I was now cascading down a river. Steve wrote, I know Hook and Hastings, Opus 1417 from 1889, well. The original home of the organ was Christ Church, Providence, Rhode Island. It is now located in St. Andrew's Episcopal Cathedral in Yokohama, Japan. Yuko's father had been the rector of this church before it became the cathedral. He was there when the church was built and relocated and built this new building. And Yuko often remarked that her father had the balcony built with a heavy floor for an organ in the future. The way Yuko told it, she received a call from Ellen Loffman of the Organ Clearinghouse that an organ was available, but it needed to be removed immediately because the church was to be demolished. So she enlisted you, meaning me, and other students to help with the removal. Ellen took care of the transport and had it sent to Japan. And then Yuko entrusted the rebuilding of the organ to Tetsuo Kasukari, who had just started his organ building business. And it was in storage for several years. The organ case did not fit the shape and size of St. Andrew's balcony, so Kusakari designed a new case. And the facade pipes were damaged, so they were replaced with silver zinc pipes. The organ was finally installed in 1984. This was a river of information. And then, said Steve, I suggested that we pay the facade pipes of the organ to something in more of the style of the Hook brothers. And so I had contacted Charles Nazarian, and he helped me with the design, and I did the painting in late 2015. And then my wife, an NEC student, Hatsumi Miura, a student of Yuko's, is one of the organists at the church. And thanks to Yuko and all of you and Barbara, who helped her, the organ sings regularly in Yokohama and is well appreciated by many people. And that, Michael Barone, was the answer to how I first met Barbara and what happened later. I couldn't believe it. There was suddenly this one question, this one little pebble of a question turned into a river of information, and it turned into a community online. So now I'm going to fast forward 3 decades, and at the time I was the chair of the New Music Committee of the 2014 AGO Convention in Boston. We decided to compile a Boston organ book full of music from Boston composers, music from the organ library, as well as contemporary music composers in Boston. So I wrote to Barbara and asked her, as the librarian at the organ library, to write the foreword. So that was another pebble. She wrote a 1-page essay about music in Boston, including the work, and I'll say it's for this book, this volume, the Boston Organ Book. And in this foreword, she wrote about the work of the young organists, Payne, Buck, Whiting, Thayer, and Whitney, who taught the even younger organists Foote, Chadwick, Parker, Dunham, and Truett. And there's another stream. One decade later, which included a 2-year global timeout, sees Barbara publishing Pioneers in American Organ Music, 1860 to 1920, including chapters on Payne, Buck, Whiting, Thayer, and Whitney, and their students, Foote, Chadwick, Parker, Dunham, and Truett. That's a river. And that river is called Barbara Owen. And thank you, Barbara. On behalf of the Boston AGO, the most interesting chapter in the entire country.
And now Dana Robinson, an esteemed advocate of historic organs. His performances in Bangor still resonate in my memory. Dana, like too many of us, can't recall the exact moment when Barbara burst upon our consciousness, but he seems to think that she was everywhere, in everything. And particularly when her monumental book of The Organ in New England came out, he read it and read it and read it again, and it's probably now part of his DNA. And he will share the result of that absorption with us now. The next speaker is Randall Wagner, who will speak through a proxy. Randy has the distinct honor of having been a co-founder with Barbara, a surviving co-founder of the Organ Historical Society back in 1956. His illustrious career with the organ supply industries, from which he has retired, sustained him, and he is still happily with us, but he chose not to travel in winter times. So, Matthew, you have some words from Randy to share.
Barbara as an OHS founder and president. Like many of us here, as a kid, I was quickly diagnosed with the disease for which there is no known cure, the pipe organ. By the time I graduated from high school, I had read many books on the pipe organ from the Oberlin College Library, was a founding member of the Lorain County chapter of the AGO, was working for the local organ builder, and had acquired my first 2 pipe organs. My high school graduation gift was a trip to New York for the 1956 AGO convention at the Waldorf Astoria, along with my mentor, Dr. Homer Blanchard. This is where I met Barbara Owen. Allow me to paraphrase from Volume 1, Number 1 of The Tracker. On Wednesday, June 27, 1956, during the AGO convention, a group of 10 organ enthusiasts met in the choir room of St. Bartholomew's Church in New York City. This was made possible through the courtesy of Harold Friedel, organist and choir director of the church. The attendees were all known to have an interest in early American organs and their builders. The idea for the gathering originated with Miss Barbara J. Owen, who was encouraged by all to proceed. The purposes were, 1, to determine if there was enough interest to establish an organization. 2, to keep a central file of old organs and to prevent loss of information. 3, to possibly establish a newsletter or publication so data could be exchanged. These were 3 of the critical tenets on which the Organ Historical Society, OHS, was founded. As word spread about the Organ Historical Society, the group expanded beyond the original attendees. The newsletter developed into a journal, and annual meetings morphed into conventions. Barbara was not only a founder, but became very active, becoming the first president from 1957 to 1961. She also served as president from 1997 to 1999. Through the years, Barbara has contributed guidance, many hours of research, and articles for the tracker. In 1988, she was honored for her involvement with the Distinguished Service Award, quote, for significant contributions of the highest order for the promotion of the society, end quote. Barbara has most recently served on the Distinguished Service Award Committee. The time and effort that Barbara has given to the OHS was pivotal in allowing the OHS to blossom into an internationally recognized organization with a library of over 15,000 volumes and an archive holding the records of many of America's organ builders and organoblia. Housed at Stoneleigh in Villanova, Pennsylvania, the OHS thrives today because of organ researchers and enthusiasts walking in the footsteps of our friend Barbara Owen. Barbara, thank you for your interest, enthusiasm, and hard work as a founder and supporter of the mission of the OHS. And warm greetings as you celebrate 90 wonderful and productive years. Randy Wagner, 15 December 2022.
You know, for a single woman, Barbara, you certainly have a lot of children. And grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We'll hear next from Frederick MacArthur, who at the moment is organist at First Church of Christ Science in Cambridge, but certainly from the perspective of a fellow like me who has had one job all of his life, I'm a bit astounded and delighted that Frederick has held positions at St. Mary Star of the Sea Church in Beverly, the Temple Israel in Boston, Old South Church, Boston, Central Congregational Church, Providence, Temple Emmanuel, Providence, and was university organist at Brown University. That's a lot of heavy lifting, son. Your turn. I sense that Mr. MacArthur was channeling a bit of his memory of the Old South organ in his registration there, and kinship with me because the Old South organ began life in the St. Paul Auditorium in Minnesota. We were sad to see it go, but it did get a wonderful new home at Old South Church, Boston. The comings and goings of things and the interesting coincidences and happenstances. Stephen Pinnell, who himself is a diligent researcher, much published author of Organalia and archivist and a longtime OHS presence, remembers meeting Barbara in 1974 at an OHS convention in New Hampshire. He, a dew-dipped 18-year-old, was getting out into the organized historical organ world kind of for the first time, and was invited to the next OHS convention. He took the bus up to Connecticut, Wallingford, from Princeton to attend with just enough money to travel one way. I'm not sure what he imagined would happen there. Alan Loftman found him some free places to stay. Ed Bodway covered food expenses, and Barbara bought him the return ticket. This is interesting because when Barbara graduated from Westminster Choir College, where Stephen, at that point of the second convergence with Ms. Owen, was also a student, she also was, shall we say, lacking in expendable income. And the college's president, John Finley Williamson, had to give her the graduation fee of $50. And so giving Stephen the money for the bus ticket was paying it forward, so to speak, and they have been longtime friends ever since. Stephen Pinnell.
There's an old adage. When an item reaches the 50-year mark, it's historical. A 50th is usually celebrated with a gift of pure gold. At 60, it's a diamond. 70, platinum. 80, a moonstone. And 90, well, to be completely honest, I had to look it up. It's granite. Granite. Strong, tough, resilient, but permanent. When Barbara was elected president of the Organ Historical Society in June 1957, the chronology of the American organ from its beginnings in the mid-19th century up until World War I had been completely forgotten. It was the youthful Miss Owen, along with Ed Bodway, Alan Loftman, Ken Simmons, and a few others, that applied the deductive method of research to the study of old American organs. Very briefly, the deductive method is the merging of contrasting layers of evidence to reconstruct the best reasoned and most logical chain of events. What had been known of American organ history was largely based on biases, recollections, and word-of-mouth anecdotes. What Barbara and the others did was to apply the physical examination of old instruments with the surviving paper records. Just finding the answers was not enough, however. The results had to be codified in some sort of a permanent format. Few of you may know that Barbara wrote not the first, but the second dissertation on American organ builders. That was her 1962 dissertation from Boston University when she graduated with a degree in musicology. A copy of that document is still in the library and archives of the Organ Historical Society. Some of the material later became the basis of her now classic book, The Organ in New England, issued in 1979 by Sunbury Press. My copy sits within arm's reach of my desk, and its broken binding and dog-eared pages stands as ample testament to its value. This became the pattern of her life: gather the material, study it, write about it, and share it with the larger organ community in the form of a publication. Everyone here has been the beneficiary of her articles and books. Barbara offers 2 bits of sensible advice to writers of organ history, including me. After my first article appeared in the Tracker in 1985, she was polite. The most important part of organ history, she told me, is the last 5 letters of the word: S-T-O-R-Y, story. You have to relate the events in an artfully crafted narrative that is story-like in its presentation. Her second bit of advice had to do with footnotes. When one of our cherished colleagues in the OHS started dumping entire bibliographies into footnotes, she wasn't polite. Notes are for documentation, she asserted. If something didn't pertain directly to the story, then leave it out. When writing about organ history, Barbara did one thing better than just about everybody else. She was able to take a very broad subject with a huge expanse of material and boil it down into an infinitely readable and flowing narrative. Everybody marvels at the beauty of her prose. In closing, I now address these remarks directly to Barbara. I attended a meeting of the OHS National Council at Newark Airport on October 26, 1984. That was 39 years ago. The archives needed a new home, and Westminster Choir College in Princeton, with its 175 organ students, was certainly the place to house that collection. The archives also needed a curator. During the meeting, Barbara turned to me, you turned to me, pointed and asserted, "We need new and younger blood in this organization. You do it." I did become the archivist, and in that instance, the entire trajectory of my life was forever changed. All right. I will always be indebted to you for the faith you put in me. Perhaps your engagement with every friend and colleague here today is not quite as momentous as it was for me, but you will always hold a very special place in my heart. I know I can speak for everyone here in wishing you a heartfelt 90th with granite and with many happy returns.
I wonder what 100 is, Stephen. Is it marble? You look that one up. Jay Lane is music director at St. Anne's in the Fields Episcopal Church in Lincoln and current dean of the Merrimack Valley chapter of the AGO. First met Barbara here in 2009 when he was auditioning for the post of music director, which he held for 7 years. During his audition, something went awry in the organ's mechanism, and Barbara jumped to the task and repaired it, but then also admonished Jay to not stomp on the pedals. So hopefully you will not stomp on the pedals, Jay. such sweet sounds. Wayne Leopold has been good friends with Barbara for 47 years, met her in the spring of 1975 when she came to Casanova, New York, a suburb of Syracuse, to give a presentation on the history of the American pipe organ, which by that time she knew pretty well and didn't realize how much more history would be made in the years that would follow. She stayed with Wayne and his partner, Robert Capon, and they became good friends. She had been to town just recently with Charlie Fisk installing a new two-manual organ at First Presbyterian Church. So was your life impacted by her, or were you already down the road, as it were? Come on, Wayne. The road of your profession, an esteemed publisher.
I will talk about that in a few minutes.
You have that opportunity now.
Good afternoon. I refer you to the copy of the program you have, which the last 2 pages lists Barbara's major text publications and her organ publications. Barbara's editing of organ music and authoring of books demonstrates an immense intellectual curiosity, a broad eclecticism, and an intense focus. In her 22 publications of organ music, her broad eclecticism is demonstrated by one publication of an English woman's organ music, Elizabeth Sterling, another publication of 4 centuries of Italian organ music, 2 of German composers' works, 2 collections of Handel, 3 collections of organ music specifically from 19th century, 3 Christmas collections, and 3 collections of English composers. I'm not done. Her intense focus is especially demonstrated by 7 collections of American organ music. The most significant, in my opinion, are the 4 volumes entitled 1776 to 1876. For their time, they were cutting-edge publications devoted to our late 18th and 19th century American organ music heritage. Very little American music had been published heretofore. They opened our eyes and ears to American organ composers. The same can be said of her 13 books and monographs. For broad eclectic editions, examples include the organ co-edited with Peter Williams, the Registration of Baroque Organ Music, and her first book published in 1979, the monumental and trailblazing The Organ in New England. For intense focus, one book is on the organ music of Brahms, 2 books are on organists, and 3 are on great American organs. There also are 3 on American organ builders, Johnson, Hook, and Fisk. And finally, her consummate work on 9 New England organ composers, their lives and their compositions, entitled Pioneers in American Organ Music, 1860 to 1920, the New England Classicists, the Red Book. Every organist should have a copy of this book. It is our American heritage. I have order forms today if you'd like to order the book. Just see me after the program. So here we have 2 books of hers. Her first book, The Organs in New England, of 1979, and now her latest book, Pioneers in American Organ Music, 1860 to 1920, the New England Classicists, which presents in great detail the organist composers who played and composed for these New England organs, with every composition by these 9 composers listed and many of them annotatively discussed. Almost the entire repertoire written for these New England organs, 1860 to 1920. They are like bookends, 43 years apart. And in between these bookends are 11 more books and monographs, 22 collections of organ music, record jacket notes, encyclopedia entries, many articles in periodicals, program notes, and a number of choral music editions. In conclusion, Barbara has lived a life of love and service to the art of the organ, a life of incredible intellectual curiosity, pursued passionately, a life of giving, a life incredibly well lived, a life to be admired, a life to be emulated. Barbara, we all owe you so much for all the work you have done and learning so much through your research, and then so generously sharing all of it with us. Thank you. And now I'd like to share a little personal story to answer Michael's question of how I got into this business. The printed program states that I met Barbara in the spring of 1975 when she came to give a lecture for the Syracuse, New York AGO chapter. During that time, she stayed with me and my partner, Robert, in our home in Cazenovia, a suburb of Syracuse. In our home, she noticed that I had collected copies of a great amount of out-of-print 19th century American organ music, just for my own personal intellectual curiosity and playing as a church organist. When she returned home to Rockport, unbeknownst to me, she called her publisher, Don McAfee, in New York City, and told him about my research and suggested that he call me to inquire about my editing of any 19th century American organ music that he could publish in the next year for the American Bicentennial in 1976. He indeed did call me on a very hot evening in July and asked me if I had anything that I would like to edit and submit to him for publication. The result was the organ works of John Knowles Paine, published in 1976. I had never dreamed in my wildest imagination that I ever would be involved with editing, publishing, or creating a foundation. But I discovered that I greatly enjoyed the excitement of research and editing, the discovery of research, which led to successive editions with McAfee of organ music of Arthur Foote, Alexander Gilmour, Schumann, and students of colleagues of Mendelssohn, Reipke, and others. The one phone call of Barbara's to Don McAfee changed the direction of my life. From being primarily a church organist to becoming first an editor, second a publisher in my own right, and finally now a founder of a foundation to preserve, reproduce, and disseminate the culture of the pipe organ. This never would have happened had it not been for Barbara's one little phone call to Don McAfee. Here is Barbara's list of publications in your program. Our current catalog has about 540 publications of organ music and organ memorabilia. That should really be an appendix to Barbara's list. Because if it hadn't been for Barbara, it never would have happened. Then, about 4 years ago, I received a phone call from Barbara. Wayne, I have written a book about the New England Romantic organ composers, the classicists. Would you publish it for me? And of course I said I would. I would be delighted. For now, I could return the generous favor she did for me in 1975. Now the circle could be complete. In closing, I offer some personal advice for everyone in this room, half in jest and half seriously. Beware, Be careful, be prepared. If Barbara makes a phone call and mentions your name, or calls you and asks a favor, you never know what might happen, because it might just also change your life. Barbara, I love you, and certainly everyone here loves you, and I will never forget what you did, and I will be always in your debt for making just one little phone call that changed my life 47 years ago.
Barbara, it must be interesting at the very least to sit and hear these people tell you how important you are to them. I don't say have been, because you continue to be important to all of us, but also to listen to them recount the many things that you have accomplished through your years and years. I'm wondering, I had an experience not quite like this recently, but I'm wondering if you're thinking, gosh, that Barbara Owen, she's an interesting person. I'd like to get to know her. Also, in her 9th decade, and also a published and esteemed organographer, Orpha Oxa, who's living in California, was not able to travel, but she says, "Happy birthday, Barbara. The 90s decade is not for the faint-hearted, but you'll be just fine." I'm counting on it. I've treasured our friendship ever since we first met in June of 1968, that Sunday afternoon when you introduced me to Boston's historic organs. The years fly by while the conversation we started back then continues. All best wishes for many more happy years, Orpha. And from Eileen Hunt, President of the American Guild of Organists. And this will come in a suitable for framing version for you, so I can cry on it and it won't make any difference. Dear Barbara, I wish I could be with you in person today to offer congratulations and to celebrate with you. However, these written words are my contribution to the happy event, as I am traveling today but deeply regret not being present in order to fully participate in the party. And the party is just about to get started. You have played a major role in my development as a musician, building a career and pursuing my studies in organ and musicology. We are both proud Boston University alumni and have shared so much over the years. I'm sorry I'm not able to be present for your celebration. On behalf of the American Guild of Organists, our members, National Council, headquarters staff, and everyone associated with the AGO, I extend warmest appreciation and best wishes for the occasion of your 90th birthday. You have been an important AGO leader at the chapter level, most notably of the Boston and Merrimack Valley chapters, and also at the national level as New England Regional Counselor. Our organization is stronger thanks to the dedication and hard work of leaders such as yourself. Your contribution to the music world, and especially the organ community, are myriad. As a member of the staff of the Fisk Organ Company, you played a major role in the production and installation of so many important instruments. As an organ consultant, you assisted churches all over the country in considering a project of rebuilding a current instrument or contracting for a new organ. Your work as a scholar and writer has given us books on such diverse subjects as organ registration, the organ music of Johannes Brahms, a biography of E. Power Biggs. Your most recent book, published in 2022, explores the New England classicist organ composers. You're author of many articles in various music journals, including our AGO publication, The American Organist. Your interest in historic instruments influenced your role as founder of the Organ Historical Society. You studied and played important historic instruments in Europe and studied with experts such as Harold Fogel, Luigi Fernando Tagliavini, and Montserrat Terrant. From a very personal standpoint, you have been a dear friend and mentor to me since I was a young teenager growing up in Gloucester and being a very frequent visitor to the Fisk organ shop. Your encouragement and assistance during my studies were a huge part of my development as a musician, and yes, you helped me to join the AGO and to become involved as a teenager. And amazingly, a little girl from Gloucester grew up to become the AGO president. The reason I am unable to attend the celebration today is because of my role as president. I am on the way to an AGO National Council meeting in California. I am with you in spirit. Happy birthday, with love and best wishes, Eileen J. Hunt. And so, it all comes home. We have the organist of the church to play for us, Justin Murphy Mancini. First became acquainted with Barbara as an undergraduate at Oberlin when he acquired a copy of the Registration of Baroque Organ Music. Little did he know that he would apply for the position she held for many years after returning to Massachusetts, and now he enjoys greeting her each week after service and hearing her comments about the music, about stomping on the pedals. Probably not, and especially when there's something that he ought to improve. So, Justin Murphy Mancini, we hope you have refined it to the ultimate for Barbara's birthday today. just a moment, you'll get to add your voice to the celebration, but two final speakers, Reverend Harold Babcock, who was minister here from 1995 to 2016 and was ministered to by Ms. Owen, I dare say. You shared pulpits at either end of the church, and Linda Lou Berciaga has been a member of this church since 1981 and has experienced Barbara in her most musical times. So,
well, I've been asked to say a few words about Barbara as music director and colleague. Of course, it was a privilege to work with Barbara Owen. I had no idea how famous she was in the organ world until sometime after I arrived here in Newburyport, and I think that is a reflection of how truly humble Barbara is. Barbara's first priority as director of music was always caring for her choirs. She was a true minister of music, ministering to the needs of her choir members and helping to create a strong sense of community among them. She was instrumental in building and maintaining not only our adult choir, but also in helping to create several wonderful choirs for the children and young people of this congregation. She was totally committed to fostering music in all of its forms here at the First Religious Society. Besides humility, one of Barbara's great characteristics is her loyalty. I never had to worry about Barbara working at cross purposes with me. She was always supportive and collegial. It goes without saying that I also never had to worry about the Sunday morning music. Barbara never complained about the hymns I chose, though I suspect she may have sometimes rolled her eyes. Now, though Barbara retired fairly early in my ministry here, we continued to be in touch. Of course, she has remained as a dedicated member here, but we also shared an interest in the congregation's partnership with a Unitarian church in the Transylvanian region of Romania. In 2003, Barbara made her first visit there along with a small group of us from the congregation. She took a leading role in renovating the small organ in our partner congregation's church, an instrument that had been unplayable for 20 years. During the first visit, Barbara used her organ building skills to get part of the organ operational, and I will never forget the tears in the eyes of the congregation when Barbara gave an impromptu concert on that partially repaired organ. Needless to say, she is beloved there, and I just want to share a couple of sentences that were sent to me from our partner church minister in the village of Uiseke in Transylvania. The community will always remember your efforts and the lion's share of contribution done for the restoration of our old organ. We remember you as one of the recurrent guests in Uiseke, a friend with a lighthearted personality. I love that. On the 21st of January, we will celebrate together in mind and spirit, wishing you happy anniversary and good health. You know, some people are not easy to travel with. This is not the case with Barbara Owen. When we arrived in Budapest on that first visit to Eastern Europe, Barbara immediately set out to visit some organ or organ builder or organist whom she knew, of course. And it was like that during the entire trip. Barbara is totally self-reliant and independent. During the several trips that we made together to Romania, I never had to worry about keeping Barbara entertained. So in conclusion, I want to say thank you, Barbara, as so many people have this afternoon. Thank you for your friendship, for your commitment to building religious community, for your generosity of spirit, that's been used before today, for your support, both musical and personal, and not least, just for being an all-around good person. It has been a privilege to know you and to serve with you. I am so grateful for all of the times that we have shared together, and I trust that there will be more to come. Thank you, Barbara.
Well, first of all, Barbara, I wore this outfit here, all these hearts, to celebrate the love that this entire community is sharing with you today. And also, we have a couple things in common. You and I are both what I term altitudinally challenged. And I so appreciate having another woman in my life that is of my stature. But I come by it honestly because my grandmother was 4'11" and was an organ teacher. I also just learned that we have something else in common. Reading your biography, it said you were born in Utica, New York, where I attended grammar school at St. Francis de Sales Catholic School. But I am here for another reason today, Barbara. I am here because the Unitarian Universalist Association, the UU Women's Federation wants to honor you today. So this is a proclamation from the president of the UU Women's Federation. Dear Barbara, it is my great pleasure to inform you that the First Religious Society, Unitarian Universalist, has chosen to honor you by enrolling you in the Clara Barton Sisterhood of the Unitarian Universalist Women's Federation. The Clara Barton Sisterhood was created by a vote of the 1979 Biennial Convention to honor UU women aged 80 or over and to recognize their contributions to the life of our religious association and women's organizations. As one of the newest members of the Clara Barton Sisterhood, you join over 760 members so far who have been honored for their commitment, their generosity, and their service. You are being honored in part for your contributions to Unitarian Universalism. Those who enrolled you in the sisterhood provided us with this overview of your service to your faith and the wider community, and I quote, and this is with help from Justin. Thank you. The quote, Barbara Owen has been a significant figure in Unitarian Universalist music making, music history, organ building, and sacred music generally for over 60 years. Barbara faithfully served the First Religious Society of Newburyport, Massachusetts from 1963 to 2002 as Director of Music, building a nascent choral program into a robust ensemble, directing the annual Candlelight Choir, and supporting both children and adults in a wide variety of musical activities. In addition to this musical work, Barbara has been an important conservator of church history, contributing to the second volume of the published history of First Religious Society in 2001. Barbara commissioned and also composed hymns and anthems that have been used in UU churches around the country, and was active in the early years of the Unitarian Universalist Musicians Network. As a music historian, Barbara has published several important and influential books, which we have had the joy of hearing all about today, including volumes on the organ music of Brahms, a biography of E. Power Biggs, a large survey of organ building in New England, and many others. Her most recent book, Pioneers in American Organ Music, 1860 to 1920, The New England Classicists, was published in 2022. In addition to these many activities, Barbara edited and published Organ and Choral Music of Early America, was an organ builder at C.B. Fisk Incorporated, and has served for decades on the board of the Methuen Memorial Music Hall. Her impact on organ music in the United States has been immense, and through it all, she maintained an unwavering commitment to Unitarian Universalism and the community of the First Religious Society, unquote. No one is more deserving of this honor than you are, and I am delighted to welcome you to the Clara Barton Sisterhood. On behalf of the UUWF membership and board, I send my congratulations in sisterhood, Mandy Goheen, President of the Unitarian Universalist Women's Federation.
Oh, the delight on her face. It's beautiful. Just another couple of things before we wrap this portion up and go downstairs to enjoy fellowship and food and more good memories, Barbara. It is also my distinct honor to let you know that the congregation and the board has unanimously voted to offer you and to bestow upon you the well-deserved, earned, and held title of Director of Church Music here, Emerita. So, Barbara. A title you have held certainly for long before this moment, but I know I speak for all of us when I tell you how indebted we are to you and how special you are to us as well. I wanted to just remind us all that there is a reception downstairs. I also wanted to ask you and invite you to join me in thanking everyone who has made this amazing celebration possible. What a gift to us all. Barbara, you keep on giving. We even got the gift of celebrating and hearing this beautiful music and these stories in celebration of you. So thank you, everyone who's here and brought us this today. A guest book we hope you'll sign on your way out or downstairs so Barbara can relish and remember everyone who is here today. And before we all join in singing a birthday ode, it's actually my honor to offer a benediction and a blessing because, as Justin said in his remarks, every Sunday Barbara is here. Every Sunday she greets us last in the line. She lets everyone else go first. And when I first started to ask her about this and had said something about not seeing her for a little while, she said to me, well, you know, I play elsewhere. And then since COVID, she's returned home here faithfully every Sunday. Barbara, you light up our life. So as we do depart from this place today, may we carry the music and the stories and the history, the legacy of your life, Barbara, and your many gifts and talents, all that you have shared, all the people you have empowered, you have helped, you have mentored. May this day be emblazoned upon your heart, upon just how special you are, how much you are respected, what a legacy that you are living and leaving in this world. May you have days and years to come of health, of joy, and of the greatest wealth there is, which is a peace of your mind and your heart. Amen. Barbara, you'd like to speak before we sing? Yes, she has a few words she'd like to offer. If you come to the microphone up here, I think that'll help. That'll be good.
Very few words from an unwritten script. For one thing, I have just been blown away by this event and hearing from so many of my lifelong friends. And in this particular space, looking up at the organ that I played for about 40 years and loved, and the people down in the pews the same way. But we all have one or two little things one can say. Some years ago, I read a clipping about a person who was not a musician. She was I think she was a tennis champion. But anyhow, one of the things she said resonated with me because she got up, and she was being honored on some or other occasion too. She stood up and said, you know, everything I have been achieved in life, someone helped me. And I've never forgotten that, because there are people here today who have helped me, and some who I have tried to help, because I think it's, if we love something and some particular way of life, we should help someone and we should pass it on. And so I'll have to give credit here to my very first organ teacher, Barbara Blakesley, at the Plymouth Congregational Church in New Haven, which is where we moved to when we left Utica. I sang in her choirs. Every church that we our family joined, we always sang in the choir, or I always did. That's because I'm Welsh. Welsh people like to sing, and they like to be in choirs. So I was a singer in their teenage group of choirs at that particular church, which doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. And one day, the director, Barbara Blakesley, said to the rehearsals, you know, the person who has been doing our library work, putting away our music and so forth and so on, after the rehearsals and services, has just gone off to college, and we need someone to fill in for her. Well, nobody seems to have responded. And then she said, I will give free organ lessons to whoever our next librarian is. And I was about 15 years old at the time. But there again, there was someone who helped me. And helped me get on, well, several people helped me get connected with Westminster Choir College, which was really the very best place for me, a wonderful place. Unfortunately, neither the church nor the original Westminster still exists, but I'm here. And I'm here because people helped me. If anyone asks me how I may have achieved this, that, and the other, someone always helped me, just like that tennis champion that I remember. Some of you are in this room today. And my only real message to you then is, if you know a young person who loves something, particularly if it's in the fine arts, I think, encourage them, help them. As for my career as an author, well, I got straight A's in English in my high school years, and the English teacher liked me and said, you know, I can recommend you as an English major when you're going to college. And I said, oh dear. And then I said, well, I've already been accepted to a music school. But as several people have been pointing out, she taught me well. She was a wonderful, in fact, how many high school teachers do you know who have a PhD? She did. So there again, right at the very beginning, without ever really knowing it, I was being helped in a certain direction. And when you get to be 90, you will, all of you. When you get to be 90, you remember back about the publication of some of the collections of organ music. I was encouraged by my good friends Peggy Biggs and E. Power Biggs, because they had used this particular publisher, but said, you know a lot about this American music, you should publish that too. You know, just a few words and a whole pile of stuff that got published from a very good friend. Every time I turn around, I was looking for a church position after I got my master's degree from some wonderful teachers professors at Boston University. Again, you hear things that you remember. A couple of things I remember from my professors there was, remember that 2/3 of, if you're writing a course, and of course we all had to write a dissertation, two things you should remember is that the word history is 2/3 story. That was something. And the other thing I remembered is if you're writing about people, which I eventually did, and in fact my last book was about people, they said you're never going to understand these people and their music unless you also study their background, where they came from, what was going on in the world during their lives and so forth. And that's something else that I've taken seriously. So even when someone tells you something that you take seriously, they're helping you, right? So if you've got some young person in your life who wants to get serious about something, give them a little help. Give them all the help you can get, because I'm kind of glad that I'm a depression kid, because life was simpler back then. It isn't now. And the young people these days have a much more complex life, lifestyle and living conditions that we depression kids had when we were children. So I think young teenagers, particularly if they're searching around for what their real love is, not in people, but in things and in work, encourage them. That's really the best advice a person 90 years old can give to people who know some people who may be only 15 years old or 20 years old or even 30 years old. Encourage them, help them, just give them a hand up, because I received a lot of hands up in my career, and I really appreciate every one of the people who have contributed to my life and my career, including the people in this church. I had knocked around several different churches in other places. They were good churches, but I was wanting to get my graduate degree, and so I came up to the Boston area, and I had been filling in a church down there, but unfortunately, they had while they had a very good minister, he left to a bigger church, and they got somebody who was, well, not interested in helping. And I told this to one of my colleagues at the Fisk Organ Company, which is when I was working there. I said, you know, I love that church. It, in fact, was a Unitarian church, a Universalist church. I said, but I cannot stand that minister. I said, do you know of any other churches that are looking for someone? They say, well, yes, there's this church up in Newburyport. I'd never even heard of Newburyport. But I went up and met, I think, 3 members of the music committee. There was no job description. The congregation was small. And I think there were 3 people on the search committee. I just met with them, told them what my background was and so forth, and they told me what I would be doing, and we had a nice, very nice minister. Actually, we've had 3 nice ministers here since I've been here, and that's really something that church musicians love, is having good ministers to work with. So right on the spot, they hired me, and I started rehearsing the choir, I think in October of that year. And one day somebody said to me, well, when are we going to get involved in the, and rehearse for the candlelight service? Now, some of you who are from around here know what that is. And I said, what is the candlelight service? Because there had been no job description. Well, they told me. We had a very successful one, and it went on, and it's still going on it still went on this year. It's a great tradition that it started long before I came here. But that was, well, about the only job description I ever got, except from the minister of the time. And I asked him, you know, what can we do together, or let me know what you would like me to do. And he just said, you run your end of the church, and I'll run mine. And this church has grown because it has had 3 good ministers since I've been here.
Barbara's already given testimony to her Welsh heritage when Matthew Bellocchio, whom, by the way, deserves some applause too. He's the man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz, who orchestrated this entire thing. Thank you, Matthew, so much. And he's sort of the gift that keeps giving too, because Barbara, when asked what sort of hymn she would like, she suggested, because of her Welsh background, that it be a Welsh tune. And so we have a Welsh tune, but Matthew, not willing to let a Welsh tune lie in tradition, has come up with a brand new text for it. I'll just read the first half for the illumination of those who might be participating in this in stream. Sing we now to Barbara Owen as she marks her 90th year. In this noble sanctuary with her friends from far and near, fate has granted us her friendship and to her great length of days. Here we share with words and music, reminiscences and praise. And now let them eat cake.